On this episode of Insight, boomer dollars, the great wealth transfer.
There's an inaccurate characterisation that baby boomers have unfairly benefited.
By my early 20s, I was able to buy an apartment for $42,000. I was earning $21,000 at the time, so that was a pretty good bargain.
I struggle to understand why we, as a group of people, have to pay more. Why?
Boomers have learnt to accumulate, but they haven't learnt how to use.
I think we're a fabulous generation.
Will you leave anything behind for your sons?
Yeah, when we travel, we buy shit. Well, it's not literally that.
Sonia, you and your partner are still working. What's your financial situation?
We own our own home, we've got healthy superannuation and a little bit of investment. So, by Australian standards, definitely we would call ourselves comfortable.
Do you mind me asking what your home's worth?
The houses in the area are all in the $3 million mark, I would say, around about that, but that's Sydney, very expensive.
What did it take for you to get to this point?
Age, frankly, because certainly when I first started out, I went straight from high school, didn't do uni at that time, was able to get a full-time job. My parents were fairly working class. We lived in the western suburbs and it was definitely expected that you got on your own 2 feet fairly quickly. And so I did that by my early 20s. I was able to buy an apartment in the western suburbs for $42,000. I was earning $21,000 at the time, so that was a pretty good bargain. And then that of course meant that I was able to move on with my then partner to buy something in the inner west, etc, etc.
Craig, you're 61. During the past 10 years, you used your super to invest in property. How many did you have in your portfolio?
In my superannuation fund, we had three. We also bought an apartment as well as the family home.
So these were investments?
Correct.
How much would you say your portfolio was worth?
$2 million, thereabouts. Plus the family home, probably $3 million.
So that's for 4 properties?
5 in total.
5 in total. Lorna, you're a baby boomer. You bought your first home when you were 23.
Yes.
How much did that cost?
$62,000.
Did you have any support from your parents at the time?
None. All on my own. Oh, with my husband.
Was your family kind of wealthy?
No, my family were very poor. They never owned a home of their own or even a car.
How were you able to purchase that home?
When I left high school, I went nursing because you got paid at the same time as getting a qualification, and I just saved and saved.
Since then, you've gone on to buy and sell several million-dollar properties. Mm-hmm. How were you able to do that?
I just kept buying from time to time, and the family had to get used to moving all the time. And then I'd find a new home, and eventually it got to the point where I didn't have to get a mortgage. I would pay cash.
You flip properties for profit and also have superannuation. How would you describe your standard of living?
Good. Comfortable.
What does comfortable mean to you?
Comfortable means that if I go into the supermarket or the delicatessen, I can pick up what I want, fresh fruit and veggies from the market. I can go out and have a coffee when I want to, and I can travel from time to time.
Do you spend much on yourself?
Not a huge amount. I still op shop my clothes.
As a baby boomer, how do you view your own generation? How would you describe it?
I think we're a fabulous generation. I think it was a lovely time to grow up. It wasn't as fast a paced life as it is now. And we didn't have the demands on us, I think, especially with social media and things like that.
How do you feel that compares with newer generations?
I think they're the generation that sees something and they want it right now. And that's why they will use services like Afterpay and live beyond their means. I don't think they're brilliant at budgeting.
Sonia, how do you feel about that?
Oh, look, I definitely agree, but I also feel that culturally our world was very different then. It was just easier to save. It was socially very acceptable to save money, to not spend money. I can understand how it would be hard as the younger generation to be able to contend with socially what they're expected to be part of.
Evan, you're an economist. How are boomers faring to other generations?
They're faring very well. And the reason I say that is boomers have learnt to accumulate, but they haven't learnt how to use. Boomers grew up in a generation where their grandparents and their parents went to war with the expectation that they would go to war, with the expectation that a recession or a depression was around the corner. You keep hearing the word comfy or comfortable, and the reason for that is because most boomers during the formative years of their life, and particularly during their working life, were going through periods where money could be taken away like that. So you'd had the late 60s recession, you had the stagflation and recessions of the 70s. You then had in Australia the recessions in the 80s and the one we had to have in 1991-92. During that period, boomers were between the ages of 25 and up to 40. Peak period of earnings, peak period where losing money would have meant going back to the start. They would have had kids, most of them by that age. So the behaviour is to save, is to keep, is to earn, and not to lose it. So the economics of it has also been interesting because in no time in history have we seen an expansion like we have seen since World War II to today. So boomers have been, inverted commas, lucky to an extent, but they are also a sign of their times. The behaviour that they've learnt with their money is why they now see themselves as comfortable, despite someone like my generation would see them as incredibly wealthy.
They are seen as the wealthiest generation ever. Is that true?
That is true. But again, it's the times they've lived through.
Let's take a look at how we got here.
Baby boomers are the wealthiest generation ever in Australia. And while they make up just over 1/5 of our population, baby boomers own more than half of Australia's wealth. So how did we get here? In their lifetime, boomers have benefited from a range of economic policies, giving many a foot into the housing market in early adulthood. And while many boomers feel they missed the boat on superannuation, the tax benefits that came with it have benefited their retirement. Skipping forward to today, boomers are entering retirement financially secure and not afraid to spend. They're reshaping the automotive industry, tourism and the property market. So how will the grey dollar affect Australia today and into the future?
Evan, we're seeing there the policies that are favourable to boomers. How much have they affected this generation?
The way they've affected it is clearly to the upside. So you can't go past superannuation, and you probably can't go changes to capital gains tax and negative gearing. The reason I say that, superannuation has meant, or at least it was supposed to mean, that pensions could be phased out and you'd live in a comfortable retirement. The thing that's been so beneficial to boomers, particularly in the latter half of their earning career, are changes to the taxation system inside it. The fact that government policy actually actively wants you to put more and more capital into it because of the tax benefits that come to it. So you go from personal income tax, which in this country is one of the highest in the world, to a superannuation taxation system, which is one of the lowest in that phase. And we're one of 3 countries only to not tax pension phase of superannuation. So once you retire, you don't pay tax inside super, and you are also one of the 3 largest impactors on the government budget because aged care, healthcare and the NDIS are more likely than not to be aged with people 50 and over.
Do we know how much boomers are actually worth?
There is a pretty reasonable estimate. It's about 1.9 trillion Australian dollars. To put that into consideration, that is a tick shy of the entire wealth of the Australian ASX 200. Wow. So that's all the big 4 banks, Telstra, Woolworths, take your pick. It's about 2.1 trillion. Boomers are 1.9.
Do you know where most of that wealth is held?
40% of it is in property. And of that, the majority, if not all of it, has no leverage, as in debt, attached to it.
What percentage of properties are being bought in cash?
It's now about 1/3. And again, it's probably going to get higher. And the reason I say that, over the next 10 to 15 years, the boomer generation is going to ask the question of the empty nest. And do they therefore have to downsize or not. And that gets back to policies before that make that problem, which is things like stamp duty.
In one sentence, how would you describe the boomer generation?
Conservative.
Wendy, you're the CEO of Travel at 60. What does your business do?
We are a travel company, Australian owned and operated. We are a little bit different though, because we have tailored a lot of what we do into making sure that we actually deliver this style of holidays and communicate in a way that the baby boomer audience will respond to.
Given that wealth that we've been hearing about, are boomers having an impact on the tourism industry?
100%, absolutely. Almost to the point where you could say that baby boomers are driving the tourism industry. So if you look at a company like ours who are taking older Australians around Australia, they're going into regional Australia. It's Toowoomba, it's Broken Hill, it's Cape York, it's Uluru, it's the Kimberleys, it's Tasmania. So I think that that's one thing that sometimes gets missed as a super important part of the baby boomers supporting the tourism industry.
Leanne and Leon, you're both retired. You just got back from a holiday. Where did you go?
We went to South America. We went to Machu Picchu, Iguazu Falls,
And Rio,
and then
Santiago,
a month before that we were in India,
Sri Lanka and Maldives.
Do you mind me asking, on average, how much these trips cost?
Well, we did it. We did a total recently, and we'd spent over around 170,000.
And that's since you retired, 5 years ago?
I was
Four for me.
yeah.
Okay. You have two sons. When they were growing up, you'd go on your family holidays. Is your retirement travel different from those trips?
Yes. When the boys were younger, we'd go to the Gold Coast or the theme parks, and we'd go to Disney and in America and do cruises.
And we still go to Disney and still do cruises.
We still do that.
I'm a Disney freak, I love it.
But our cruises with the boys, we always generally had an inside cabin, all four of us in the one cabin. Now we do more balcony.
And we do more destination cruises and seeing the wonders of the world. We marked them off the other day, so that was pretty good.
I'm actually thinking it's lucky we even got you in the room tonight.
Yeah, well, we're away in another couple of weeks, so we probably won't watch this live.
Why did you decide to retire and travel at the point that you did?
We went to a financial advisor a year before we were thinking about retiring, and he looked at what we had, because we've done all the right things by investing in property, boosting up our super, making sure that was healthy, going without a lot of things, And he said, you're crazy if you don't retire when you can, because you'll spend most of your wealth on travel or whatever in the first 10 years. And then after that, it slows down. So it's changing your mindset. You get into a phase now where you actually spend instead of save. Yeah. And so I'm trying to convince him we've got to spend now, because if we don't spend it, he gets it.
Could you relate to sort of what Evan was saying there? You're
Absolutely.
in that mindset of saving, accumulating.
Yeah.
Was it hard to make that switch?
It was easier for me.
Yeah.
He's a bit of a tight ass. So. And again, we've been brought up with parents that have always saved.
And we never had new cars or anything.
No.
I always had second-hand cars until recently.
When you were making that decision, was there a part where you said to yourselves, look, we've raised our boys, we've worked hard, this is time for us?
I'm constantly telling him that and putting the figures in front of him, going, we're not going to be able to spend all this money, so let's do it, because in another 10 years, we won't be able to go on.
Do the big overseas trips.
We won't be climbing the Great Wall of China. We won't be going up Machu Picchu. We won't be doing those things. So we've got to do it now, because what else is there? That's life.
You belong to an online group called Spending the Kids' Inheritance, or SKI. What is that group about?
It's about inspiring people to have holidays, if that's what they want to do.
We put a lot of travel deals up, so if there's a special going, we'll put it up. And just what I wanted to do was show people that if you dream about going somewhere, you can do it. Go in there and do it, and this is how you do it. This is the deal, just fill it out, send your money in and off you go. Because if you don't do it now, you're not going to do it.
How common is the SKI philosophy?
The more that we're travelling, the more we're meeting people that are thinking the same way. Just coming back off this recent trip, there must have been 4 or 5 couples that were in the same position as us. Got to a point where they've just thrown in their jobs, they're retired, and you're sitting there and they're going, have you done Africa yet? And we go, no, so we've got to put Africa in our list. And then have you done this?
You compare holidays and, you know.
Alex, Leanne and Leon are your parents. How do you feel about their spending?
It's their money. They've worked hard their entire life and invested well in order to get that money, so I think they should be able to do whatever they'd like with it.
Would you define it as spending the inheritance?
I never really saw their money as mine to begin with. I'd never really thought about an inheritance because I think they've raised me to be self-sufficient in that I don't need that money from them. Mum always taught me, said from when I was little to, you know, like she always wanted me to get a degree and, you know, do well at school so that I could get a job that pays well. And she always said that she wanted me to do better than herself and my dad. So I think that they've successfully been able to do that to the point where I don't really need their inheritance.
You're 26. Have your parents ever offered you financial support?
They've never directly given me money. I did purchase my first property from them at quite a good deal, I'll put it that way.
Was it sort of at market value?
It was probably about half of what it would probably go for.
We often hear about this bank of mum and dad. Would you have been able to enter the property market without your parents' help?
Yeah, I think it would have been, I would have, but it would have been hard.
Leanne and Leon, is your bank of mum and dad closed?
Yes.
Yes.
Because he's got a brother that we've done the same thing to.
His brother's got the same, so houses next to each other, so.
Leanne, why was it important for you to help your sons into the property market?
Because it didn't affect our standard of living and it is hard for them to get into the market. The way we did it too, it was sort of, you teach them how to invest. You're starting them on the same, sort of the opportunities that we sort of had. We didn't really have opportunities, but we learnt. And so I just wanted to do it that way where they're learning about handling tenants and working out, you know, capital gains and negative gearing, all that type of things for their advantage. And then they can see how it's benefited us later on. I hate debt, personal debt. And so that was one of the things we did was pay off the house really quick and then use that as capital to show the kids that's the way you can do it so that you're better off later on.
Now, I understand you use a picture of the boys for your ski Facebook group. Tell us about that.
There it is.
Here it is. Can you explain that for us?
I thought it was hilarious. I think I must have laughed for about a day, right? And I said to Leon, do you think we should put this up? And he goes, just said, yeah, we did it anyway, so.
Didn't ask me first though.
No. No, that's why we scrubbed your face out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Nobody would know it was you.
How could they tell?
Oh, so Alex, you didn't know about the photo?
No, not until it was sent to me by you guys a couple weeks ago.
There you go. Zoe, you're Lorna's daughter. Has mum helped you into the property market?
She has, yes, significantly so. Unfortunately, I'm 36 years of age. I had to spend probably easily over 100,000 on some medical things, unfortunately. And at this point in my life, it was just a case of any funds that I had that were building up for a house deposit. It's put me back at ground zero, unfortunately. And without that assistance from mum, trying to get into the property market at this point with the prices skyrocketing as they have in the last even just 5 years, it did not seem remotely feasible in the next 5, 10, potentially even 15 years.
How much help are we talking about here?
Gosh, she essentially went in half with me on a property, so I believe it was roughly around $375,000, and then I've got the mortgage for the rest.
You're 36. How did you feel about receiving that help from your mum?
I was completely against it initially, actually. I would have much preferred she use that money, but it's one of those things where it wasn't until mum came back and explained to me that what would bring her joy would be actually seeing those funds used while she was still alive.
Lorna, how were you able to give Zoe that amount of money?
I just drew it down for my superannuation. I have a very healthy superannuation and I'd always put more than I needed to into it, and that's what I did. I didn't realise that I also had to pay the HEX debt before she could get her loan.
Oh, so you paid that too?
I paid that too because the bank would be reluctant to give her the amount she needed, which was half the property price.
Zoe, what has that support meant to you?
I would not have been able to get into the property market without that assistance. It's been life-changing.
Lorna, you also have an adult son.
Yes.
Do you support him financially as well?
I've helped out with smaller things. I gave them a new car at the beginning of the year, and I help out with things for the grandchildren. If there's braces, if there's surfing or netball, things that they want to do. Even if they did an overseas holiday, they did a Disney cruise because they're Disney fans. So I said I'd give the girls their spending money for it. They just forgot to tell me it was Australian dollars that they, American dollars that they were talking about. So what I had offered had to be doubled.
Sonia, you have 2 children. They're 22 and 18. They're still living at home. Will you support them financially?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that we're going to have to. It's not one of those things that we really thought about till about maybe 5 years ago when it started to really hit home, the values of properties, and I just don't see how they get there entirely on their own.
What are your concerns if you don't support them?
I'm worried they'll move away, they'll move somewhere very remote, that they won't have children, and neither of those options are a problem from my point of view, as long as their choice. And if they can't get to the same starting gate that we were able to in our early to mid-20s, then I worry that they will be on the wrong side of the social divide. And I think everybody would agree that that's widening as properties increase in value and are used for investment, that's just getting wider and wider. And, you know, we've got something of a social conscience, and that feels like I don't want my kids on the wrong side of that divide, but it does, you know, it hits.
Evan, all eyes are on inflation at the moment. Is there anything wrong with boomers spending their money?
No, there isn't anything wrong. Boomers' spending is not necessarily the contributing only issue to inflation. Inflation's been driven by lots of things, and it's actually driven by essentials: education, health, shelter, which we're talking about with property. You also then throw in there basically energy, so fuel, transportation, etc., and food. They are all sitting at about 5% on inflation. Pretty much everything else is either at or below the 2 to 3% band. So boomers spending, yes, they're putting money into the economy, but they are not the only reason that inflation is currently quite sticky.
Is boomer spending up at the moment?
It's up, yes, but it's not through the roof. They are spending and it is up, but they are not spending an incredible amount of money. Is that they still know they need that to live for the unknown question as to when it finishes.
Myra, you're a social researcher. You co-authored a study called Rich Boomer, Poor Boomer with your dad. Do we have a generational divide here?
Yes, absolutely. I think there's definitely a big divide within the baby boomer generation, and I think part of the issue in talking about the baby boomers as a lucky generation or as a wealthy generation means that it disguises very substantial wealth inequalities within the baby boomer generation and conceals what is very serious disadvantage among some segments of the generation.
Where do you think the judgment comes from towards boomers who have accumulated wealth?
I think there's an inaccurate characterisation that baby boomers have unfairly benefited from a range of social and economic conditions, and young people are struggling. So there's this kind of inaccurate link between how well baby boomers are doing and how much young people are struggling. And I actually think it's not just wealthy baby boomers that are the recipients of this judgment. It's all baby boomers, no matter how much wealth they have.
Lorna, are boomers unfairly judged and blamed?
I think they are by the media. I think they blow it all out of proportion and they give a very one-sided point of view. Some of us have probably done 2, 3, 4 jobs, you know, at a time, and we've scrimped and saved. So I think it's fair that we can do what we want to do now.
Leanne and Leon, unfairly judged, blamed?
I agree 100% with Lorna.
Yeah. And I don't take any notice of anyone. It doesn't matter. I live in my own little world and just book another trip.
Sonia, you own a property in part of Sydney where houses are selling for around $3 million. Would you consider downsizing once your kids leave home?
If we want to access funds to help them, for example. Downsizing just isn't a financially sensible way to do it, by the time you've added stamp duty, etc. And I'm not sure, I think we prefer to side size rather than downsize. So I'm not sure that that's something that we would consider.
Evan, research tells us that 80% of boomers won't downsize their family homes. Is that affecting the property market?
Yeah, that's a supply issue, right? So if you're not changing supply because people are sitting still, part of the reason the prices in Australia are so high, demand constantly keeps going. You go from being single to a partner to a family and so on and so forth. And that therefore governs that demand will need housing that changes. But what we're also talking about here is there's other things. The behaviour is, again, part of this question. Stamp duty, a transactional tax, it is one of the biggest roadblocks to transfer because the behaviour is, why am I giving the government money just to move? And then the next part of the question is also with supply, it needs to be supplied in an area that they want to be. Why do they have to downsize to somewhere they don't want to be? Because the housing in the areas they've grown up or the areas they now live or the places where their friends and family live, it doesn't exist. So again, there are so many barriers for why they won't move. And again, the impact on housing is huge because when they do finally move, it might be 1 out of possibly 10 that should. And therefore the demand for that single house rather than the 10 houses is so high that the price is where it is. So all of this filters into it. It's taxation policy, it's supply and the demand of products that they want, so houses that are small but in the areas that they need. All of these things are reasons why 80% of boomers want to stand still because they have worked so hard, as we keep hearing. They've gathered so hard for what we also keep hearing. Why do they need to move? And for moving, get charged to do it.
Craig, you used your superannuation to buy a few apartments. What happened to those investments?
Well, me and my wife got together later in life, and 10 years ago we decided that a way forward was to invest in property. So we went down the line of investing in 3 separate properties first through our superannuation policy, take up the benefits of doing that. And unfortunately, the last 4 or 5 years has seen increased interest rates nationally, obviously, and pricing market for the properties that we bought have dropped in the backside. We were losing like $15,000 a quarter funding our investment properties. And so we had to come to the decision to opt out of them and opt out of all of them, and we've lost money on them.
So you didn't have investments, you had debts at this
We had
point.
debt. We had stages there, we were paying nearly 10%. The rents coming in weren't even anywhere near it. All of them have body corporates, land tax that we was introduced, new upgrades of apartments, people not paying the rent, interest goes up 3 or 4 times a year, you can't regain the money. All of a sudden you're churning superannuation, it's going out the door before it's coming in.
Were you able to up the rents?
We actually had a property in metropolitan Melbourne that when the pandemic hit, our glorious leader at the time had to freeze rents. Not only did they freeze rents, all through Melbourne people were requesting reductions or they were moving out. And so therefore the actual rent, we've only just this year started to get the rent we were getting 4 years ago and paying a considerable amount more in interest every month.
How many properties do you have left?
We sold one about a month ago. The other one's up for sale now, and we've had a lot of people through. The third, we're going one by one.
Why did you decide to convert your super to property in the first place?
It was more about growing our capital base. We were comfortable with our superannuation, and this is 10 years ago. Our portfolio in superannuation would only be what it was 10 years ago because we've worked and we're in professional jobs. We bring in a reasonable salary, so we're able to still enjoy the bits of life that we want to. We would have been grey nomading by now, but that's, as I said, that's been put back 4 or 5 years. It is what it is.
Myra, what is the reality for boomers who are not cashed up?
The idea of the wealthy generation is not the reality for some baby boomers. We know that about 1 in 6 baby boomers don't own their own home. We know that women aged 55 and over are one of the fastest growing groups of people experiencing homelessness. We also know that older people experience really considerable barriers in the workforce. So, baby boomers experience high levels of age discrimination. And once they lose a job, it's very difficult for them to find a new job. And so this sort of issue of homogenising the generation really conceals this kind of group of baby boomers who aren't represented in this idea of the wealthy boomer.
There's a view that all boomers are cashed up, but as we're hearing, it is not all boomers.
Many baby boomers are living the Australian dream. Family, home ownership, security in retirement, but not all of them. Some have faced poor health, low incomes and divorce, and couldn't afford property. And boomers aren't the only ones missing out. Younger players joining the game have found it difficult to get a foot in the door. But relief may be on the horizon. With boomers getting older, Australia's on the verge of an inheritance tsunami. But just how much this wealth transfer will benefit our younger generations is yet to be seen. It could be a little, or it could be a lot.
Myra, do you think boomers are unfairly judged?
I think people love to judge the baby boomers. They're framed, I think, unfairly in a malevolent way. And what it means is that it takes attention away from some of the deeper inequalities in wealth and income that are really problematic.
Craig, have you ever been on the receiving end of boomer bashing because of your age or your investments?
I wouldn't say directly to my face, because that would be a bit of a confrontation in itself. But I always remember, 20, 25 years ago, the notion that we were going to be the biggest debt in this country there could ever be, because we were all becoming out of retirement and needing nursing homes. I find now that the fact that we're not, and the fact that we are able to look after ourselves, there still seems this pent-up animosity towards us. I just find it distasteful.
Angus, you're almost 64. You have a mortgage on your home.
Yes.
Do you feel unfairly targeted?
I don't particularly feel targeted as a baby boomer, but certainly my own lived experience is very, very different to the majority of people who spoke in the room tonight. I'm not wealthy. I have no superannuation. I'm dependent on my own business for an income because there's nobody else who will give me a job. At this stage, best projections are I'm going to have to work till 75 to pay off the mortgage and other debt.
How much do you have in super?
Less than $3,000.
Was that because of investments gone wrong, like in Craig's situation?
2 very expensive divorces.
Did you have any investment properties?
Yes, at one stage, with my first marriage, we had an investment property and a share portfolio. I lost both the investment property, the house and the share portfolio in that first divorce, and came out with negative net worth in 2005.
We've heard from boomers who have financially supported their kids. Is that the case for you?
I wish it could have been, but it's not something I've been able to do. And in fact, I have had to borrow from my children at times, particularly my son, thank you Arthur, because there was simply no money and there was no choice.
Arthur, you're Angus's son. What's your financial situation?
I'd like to say, I do pretty well for someone my age, I guess. I work as an engineer. It's a decent income. I currently live in a share house, trying to save up to get a place to live, buy a place. I can't really afford a 2-bedroom apartment, which is what I'd sort of like to be able to get. At the moment, I could really only realistically afford a 1-bedroom place. I'd say that's mostly a consequence not so much of getting a deposit up, but just that I can't borrow enough to get the mortgage. I have quite a large HECS debt, which obviously makes it harder to borrow. And based on how much I can borrow, if I wanted to get like a 2-bedroom apartment, I need just a bit more than where I am. And so I'm sort of racing, maybe I can get a raise, maybe I can save a bit more. But, house prices are running away faster than I can save, really. So.
Angus, how does it make you feel that you don't have that inherited wealth to pass on to your son?
I feel the best I can probably achieve is to have my estate not owing any money. So I at least don't want to burden my kids with that.
Given your financial situation, what will retirement look like for you?
The pension. If I'm well enough and can keep working enough to pay the mortgage, if I can't pay off the house, I am at the moment one serious illness away from homelessness. That's a blunt reality. I have no security in my future.
Sonia, what will retirement look like for you?
I don't know. I think we're planning to continue working for quite a few years yet. We do enjoy working, but the fact that we have kids that we want to help, and after hearing a few stories in the room, I'm thinking maybe more than we initially thought. I think we'll have a reasonably comfortable retirement. I don't see any reason why we wouldn't, as long as we don't live to 110 or something.
We caught up with Grace, who describes herself as a cheapskate.
We first arrived in Australia, and this tells you everything about it. Migrating with little children is very scary, especially if you don't know the language. Qantas. These were from the airport, and it was then that I realized what I was actually doing. We came from Holland in 1981. We had $250, and oh, I was so homesick. We finally managed to buy our own house in 1991. It was 18% interest. We really struggled. We didn't go on holidays, we didn't eat out. To us it was more important to have that security of being in this house. I actually joke and call myself a cheapskate. I love op shops. I suddenly discovered that I could get items that cost me only a fraction of what I would pay in the shops. What's not to like? And if I find something, it's a win for me. I see things in the news, the boomers this and the boomers that. It is almost as if they want to make me feel guilty about having what I have. A lot of boomers are not wealthy. A lot of boomers don't have multiple properties. They are just like me. And we shouldn't be penalized for actually doing that. We don't have any real super because we were always self-employed. To have my own home, to have a husband and children who love me, and to be able to walk in nature, that's all I need. I like a nice dress as well.
Evan, we've been talking a little bit about inflation. Does that mean that less wealthy boomers like Grace are better for the economy?
Not necessarily better. They are obviously still part of the demand. But yes, someone like Grace isn't putting the kinds of money that they're being perceived as putting into the economy. In terms of the impact that an individual or a group in her scenario are doing to the inflation story, it's collectively not moving the dial. They're not increasing it, but they're also not decreasing it either. They are part of that group of people that are probably just getting through and are dealing with what everybody in all generations, wealth, middle, lower economic groups are feeling, which is that the inflation story is the essential story. Those things that you must have, not the things that you want to have. And again, Grace's story is a perfect example, is that when she does want something she wants, she's finding cheap ways to do it.
What about the burden in terms of pension?
So the pension is the great interesting story going forward. And the reason I say that is you look more and more about the government revenue. And this is what's so fascinating about the discussion right now, why in the media and why there are people talking about the great burden from the wealth not transferring through, is because just on or just under 60% of the federal government's revenue comes from personal income tax. If you think about that, every other tax that's out there, 60% of it comes from workers. And that's only going to get smaller because the boomer generation, as you already said, is nearly 1 in 5. The millennials are the next ones. They're about 1 in 5 as well. And they're the ones that are screaming the loudest at the moment with regards to that impact, that difference that's going on. So there comes a point where the tax mix is going to get discussed and it's not going to be friendly. And why I say that, aged care, healthcare, welfare, pension are in the top 5 biggest impactors on the revenue output, so the expenditure side of the government. So what do they have to do? They're going to have to start asking boomers who have worked very hard their entire life, who have been taxed their entire life, to probably be taxed more.
Craig, how do you feel when you hear that boomers are potentially hurting the economy?
Perplexed, really. We've basically set the basis of wealth, I suppose, in the economy. And we're trying to understand why that is something that's held against us is really disconcerting, I suppose. I've paid tax all my life. Taxed when I was a paper boy, taxed all the way through to where I am now. I struggle to understand why we, as a group of people, have to pay more. Why?
Lorna, how do you respond when younger generations criticise yours?
I don't actually hear a lot of the criticism from Zoe's contemporaries or anybody like that. I find it is the media that is doing most of the criticism.
Do you feel like the criticism's justified?
No, it's not at all. We have worked really, really hard and paid lots of tax. We really have. And I mean, what are they going to do now? They're going to put an inheritance tax on us. Is that going to be the next step, like the UK have done?
Myra, in your work, you've described boomers as generation scapegoat. What does that mean?
I guess it's just capturing this tendency to blame baby boomers, most often in the media, but sometimes beyond, for a variety of social ills. We know that a large proportion of wealth sits with baby boomers. Any older generation is going to have more wealth because they've been in the game longer, they've had longer to earn and to save. But part of the problem, I think, is that all of this talk about the generational divide really conceals another big divide between the wealthy and the not wealthy across generations. Recent research we've done on class and privilege has found that people from wealthy backgrounds, for example, are much more likely to go to university, to be offered opportunities in the labour market, to enter the housing market, to form the sort of social connections and cultural capital that make it easier for them to enhance their wealth. And so the really big and concerning divide, in my view, is the divide between the wealthy and the not wealthy rather than between the generations.
Evan, if this is about class, does that mean boomers are off the hook?
No, they're not off the hook. They are in a scenario now where they have gone from being the accumulator to the user. They are now also in a scenario where policy is also now going through another level in their favour. And that is where some will ask them that they need to actually step up. And by that, we need to start talking about, do we actually need to look at the haves and the have-nots and actually going, haves, you do have. We need to actually ask you to continue to help those that don't have with policy change.
Is this imbalance something that needs fixing, or is it just natural for generations to have differences in wealth?
Both. There is no silver bullet. There is no 10 silver bullets to fix this issue. And many governments of all colours and persuasions have tried. And normally we forget also, it gets back to the behaviour that I keep talking about. Policy changes has a policy action that has almost an equal but opposite reaction. If we change tax policy on superannuation, it's going to create a reaction that will have problems in other parts of the economy. So there is no silver bullet, but we still have to try and close that gap. And that does mean, small things, concession cards for all seniors, that probably needs to be means tested. The means test around the house, and that's not a popular comment, needs to be considered as well. Because again, the haves and the have-nots, not just in the baby boomers, but across the generation, is still there. The catch is, how do you keep aspiration? How do you keep us getting away from being a generation and a nation that has the highest level of trusts and tax aversion policies on the planet?
Leanne and Leon, your self-described ski parents, spending your kids' inheritance. Will you leave anything behind for your sons?
Well,
Yes.
yeah, when we travel, we buy shit. Well, it's not literally that.
I call them souvenirs.
Yeah, so it's something under $5. It's something that's disposable. We don't want to spend our money on things anymore. So we buy crap like this.
Ah.
Yeah, and so this is what the kids are getting. There's also 102 mugs and 30
30-odd
cruise ship models as well.
Models, yeah.
Wow, so these are shelves in your house?
Yeah, full of rubbish. And there's an odd number, so I'm sure there's going to be a fight at the end for that last piece.
What do you call these shelves?
The shit shelf.
The shit shelf.
Yeah. They're our pride and joy.
Alex, are you happy with that?
Some of those ship models do belong to me, so there's no...
So Sam's not getting any.
No, Sam's not getting those.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's some nice stuff there. No, I guess all jokes aside, I think it's less about what I'm going to be inheriting money-wise and more what I've learnt through my parents throughout the years. Like, they've really taught me the price of $1 in the sense that, like, when I was, I think, 8, I got a paper route and was earning myself money because I wanted to play video games. Ever since I was 15 and 9 months, or whatever the legal exact month you can get a job is, I've had a job since then. So all the great things that I'll be inheriting from myself is great. And if there's anything money-wise that gets passed down, that's great. But
Arthur, you're 33. Are you expecting to inherit anything from your father?
No, I don't think so. I think that's pretty unlikely.
Do you feel any resentment towards boomers who are wealthy?
No, not particularly. Like, people are going to live their life according to the environment that they're put in, right? Like, I think it's really unfair to be judgmental of people because they were born at a particular period of time. And so I think people, they grow up and they want to provide a house for their children. They want to, do all the things that people want to do with their life, right? Like, I think this is what anyone would do. It's what I want to do. Why would I be resentful of someone else doing what I would like to do? But I think that maybe a place where that feeling lands is more in terms of the policy frameworks that, as a society, and this isn't about a generation, this is about everybody, we've decided to put in place a certain set of policies. In Australia, it's very difficult for a government to put in any policy that's going to reduce the cost of housing because there's so much vested interest in housing. People see it as a vehicle of wealth generation, and you can't have housing being something that everyone has access to, owning an own home, and be a vehicle of wealth generation. Like, it's kind of logically inconsistent. So I think that, we're in this situation, and I think we need to start, I think that's where it needs to land, because that's focusing on the problem is going to get us closer to coming up with solutions.
Evan, you're an economist. What impact will boomers passing down their wealth have on the economy?
It's going to be substantial. I mean, you can't deny the amount of transfer that's going to happen. Now, what is done with that is the great debate. It's going to create a wealth increase that we haven't really seen either between a transfer. It's going to create some form of generational stimulus that we just probably can't equate yet.
Will there be greater disparity between people in that next generation and the generation below that?
There'll be definitely a disparity between the haves and the have-nots. Whether it's between the generations is a different story.
Are there ways we can close or mitigate that disparity?
The disparity, unfortunately, will be there. Again, policy will try, remembering that there's going to be a reaction to policy changes. But we've talked about inheritance tax. Now, inheritance tax is interesting because there's also an argument with it. It'll bring forward the tsunami. Because if all of a sudden you are told that once you pass away, you're going to get taxed to your kids or to whoever it is that you're leaving it to, well, actually, I'm going to start using it now because under the current rules, all things being equal, they can do that. They can gift to a certain level of amount of money. And all of a sudden you're bringing forward that tsunami of money that's going to come in the later half of the next 2 decades to now.
Zoe, what do you think about your potential inheritance being taxed?
I'm personally for it. I think anything that can, I suppose, help with shifting not the wealth imbalance between generations, but the wealth balance between classes. I think ultimately anything we can do in that regard is what we should be aiming for. Just redistribution of wealth in that regard. I think inheritance tax is potentially a good way to go about it. Obviously, it's not as simple as that, as Evan's indicated. It's not a silver bullet. There's not 10 silver bullets, but it's something that would help.
Evan, are we likely to see an inheritance or death tax anytime soon?
No, because no government can survive that kind of policy with the current settings that we have.
Craig, will your financial setbacks affect how much you'll be leaving your children?
I'm more inclined to spend it. Whatever's left they can have. I mean, I'll always have the family house. And that will be of wealth to the three of them. So there will always be something left for them. And I'd be remiss if I didn't leave them something.
Is there anything you think you can't do for them now that you would have liked to have?
Not really. I mean, they've all had good upbringing. They've all gone to reasonably good schools. They've all got good jobs. They're all married or engaged, or they're just about. Sorry, Dylan. No, not really.
Leanne and Leon, your sons are established and you're enjoying your retirement very much. Where are you travelling to next?
We're off to the USA, a couple of cruises, Alaskan cruise, Mexican cruise, and of course there's a Disney
Comic-Con.
Comic-Con.
It's called D23 and I love it.
So
Every 2 years and Disney company put it on in Anaheim and it's 90,000 people go and people dress up in outfits.
So that's
He
the main
puts up
reason.
with it.
I put up with it.
Yeah.
And we're going to Las Vegas as well because it's our 30th. We got married in Vegas 30 years ago, so we thought we might as well go there.
So you're going to be adding to the shit shelf over the next few months?
absolutely.
Yes, yeah.
Well, there you go, Alex. There's more for the
to come.
inheritance.
Can't wait.
He's going to have a big skip for all of it, aren't you?
Thank you so much, and thank you to you all for being here. You can catch up on this episode or any others on SBS On Demand. I'll see you next time.